The roar of the engines, the blur of color at 180 miles per hour, and the deafening cheer of 150,000 fans under the Texas lights. It was October 13th, 2000, and for Tony Roper, it was supposed to be just another race night, his 60th start in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. But what happened on lap 32 would end his career, his life, and unknowingly help ignite a shift in NASCAR safety that came just moments too late. There was no explosion, no fiery spectacle, just a sudden, violent collision, two impacts in under a second, and then silence. His name didn't make national headlines for long. It barely lingered in post-race coverage. But make no mistake, this crash shook the sport to its core. So why was it so quickly forgotten? And what really happened in those final moments before his truck slammed the concrete wall? The answer lies not just in one crash, but in a troubling pattern NASCAR was trying desperately to ignore. Tony Roper didn't come from the glitzy, sponsor-heavy world that some racers are born into. He was Missouri-born and fuel-blooded, the son of veteran short-track racer Dean Roper, a man who spent decades carving through dirt ovals and fairground tracks in America's heartland. By the time Tony could walk, he wasn't just watching races. He was in the pits, in the trailer, in the seat of a go-kart, long before most kids were allowed behind the wheel of anything faster than a bicycle. Racing wasn't a hobby, it was family DNA. From local go-karts, he graduated quickly to commodifieds and late models, cutting his teeth on both dirt and asphalt circuits across the Midwest. In 1992, his persistence paid off. Tony was named runner-up for ASA Rookie of the Year in the ultra-competitive American Speed Association, a breeding ground for legends like Mark Martin and Rusty Wallace. ASA wasn't just a league, it was a testing ground for raw talent. And Tony didn't just survive it, he earned respect. By 1995, Tony had clawed his way into the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, a rough, unpredictable new battleground for racers trying to make a name for themselves on TV. There were no guarantees, no big-money sponsors waiting at the finish line, but there were eyes, and Tony was determined to prove he belonged. Over the next 5 years, he did exactly that. Driving for small teams like MB Motorsports, he started 60 races, picked up 8 top 10 finishes, and made his presence felt with a standout second-place run at Indianapolis Raceway Park in 1998, a track where patience and precision are everything. He was never flashy, but he was smart, fast, and clean, the kind of driver others trusted to go wheel-to-wheel at 160 miles per hour. In 1999, he dipped his toes into the Busch Series, what we now call the Xfinity Series. He wasn't winning, but insiders noticed. Here was a guy grinding his way forward, one race at a time, without big sponsors or famous last names. But all of that, the hard work, the years of building, led to one night under the Texas lights, October 13th, 2000. A Riley 400K, a packed house at Texas Motor Speedway. Tony had qualified mid-pack, 15th on the grid, behind the wheel of the number 26 Ford. It wasn't a perfect spot, but with the right moves and some luck in the draft, it was a race where anything could happen. And Tony knew it. He was climbing, quietly, smoothly, focused. But what no one knew, not the crew, not the broadcasters, not even Tony himself, was that this race wouldn't end with a checkered flag. The green flag had waved, and the pack was settling into rhythm, but not calm. Texas Motor Speedway doesn't allow that. The trucks were running tight, nose to tail, inches apart at nearly 180 miles an hour, with drivers battling for every inch of clean air. The track's high banking makes it possible to go full throttle through the corners, but it also means one mistake can trigger a chain reaction faster than anyone can avoid it. On lap 32, it all went wrong. Grissom and Ware made contact. Nothing spectacular, just a racing scrape, but it was enough to slow Grissom's truck unexpectedly on the front stretch. Tony had less than a second to react. Traveling at full speed, he darted low, trying to squeeze between the two trucks. A split-second decision, made at the limit of human reflex. There wasn't enough room. Tony's number 26 Ford veered sharply right and slammed head-on into the concrete wall along the front straightaway. The truck crumpled instantly, the front end folding like paper under the violent impact. And then, before the wreckage could even settle, Grissom's truck slid back into Tony's, hitting the driver's side with devastating force. 2 impacts, 1 second, a nightmare unfolding in real time. Debris scattered across the track. Smoke billowed from the mangled wreckage. Drivers behind swerved to avoid the scene. The announcers fell silent. Pit crews froze. Tony Roper wasn't moving. The damage to the front and side was catastrophic. They cut open the roof to extract him from the cockpit. His helmet was still on, his fire suit intact, but he was unresponsive. He had taken one of the most brutal combinations in motorsport. A direct frontal impact, followed by a side blow to the driver's door. Medics rushed him to the infield care center. Tony had suffered a basilar skull fracture, a deadly injury at the base of the skull that interrupts blood flow to the brain and causes massive, irreversible trauma. It's the kind of injury that doesn't always leave visible damage, but its internal consequences are almost always fatal. His family, Father Dean and loved ones, were at his side. In the early morning hours of October 14, 2000, Tony Roper was pronounced dead. He was 35 years old. What makes this even more chilling is what happened in the 5 months before his crash, and what it revealed about a sport in denial. Tony Roper wasn't the first NASCAR driver to die in 2000. He was the third. Just 5 months earlier, on May 12th, the racing world lost 19-year-old Adam Petty, grandson of NASCAR legend Richard Petty, after his car slammed into the wall during practice at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. A stuck throttle sent him straight into the barrier. He died instantly from a basilar skull fracture. Then, on July 7th at the same track, Kenny Irwin Jr. died in almost the exact same way. Same injury, same circuit, same eerie silence afterward. By October, when Tony's crash happened at Texas, NASCAR had already seen 3 drivers suffer nearly identical fatal injuries in less than 150 days. That's not coincidence. That's a crisis. At the time, there was already a growing chorus of experts warning NASCAR about a specific risk. Violent deceleration injuries, causing the head to whip forward at the moment of impact, snapping the base of the skull and disconnecting the brainstem from critical blood vessels. The solution existed. It was called the Hans device, head and neck support, a carbon fiber brace that anchored a driver's helmet to their shoulders, preventing the fatal forward snap. It had been developed in the 1980s by Dr. Robert Hubbard. It was proven to work, but NASCAR hadn't mandated it. Most drivers didn't wear it, Tony Roper included. Some said it was too restrictive, some said it was ugly, some just didn't want to break tradition. And without a rule from NASCAR, teams and drivers brushed it off. Tony's crash should have been a turning point, but instead, the headlines faded. There was no sweeping change, no emotional tributes on national TV, no memorial decals on every car. Within days, NASCAR was back to racing. But behind the scenes, something had shifted. Quiet conversations in haulers turned into heated ones in boardrooms. Tony wasn't a superstar, but his death was different. Not because he was famous, but because by now, it was impossible to call this a coincidence. 3 young drivers, 1 year, 1 deadly flaw. And it still wasn't over. The days that followed Tony Roper's death were filled with shock and silence. There was no long memorial segment during the next race broadcast, no major NASCAR press conference. His name slipped into the shadows of headlines already stretched thin by Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin Jr. But inside the garage, people were shaken. 3 promising drivers, all lost to nearly identical injuries in a single season, and still no safety mandate in place. NASCAR quietly ramped up its internal safety discussions. Behind closed doors, officials reviewed telemetry, crash data, and medical reports. The cause was clear. The violent head motion in frontal crashes was proving deadly. And yet, the Hans device remained optional. It wasn't until 4 months later, after Dale Earnhardt's fatal crash at Daytona in February 2001, which you can learn about from our video on screen, from the same type of injury, that NASCAR finally acted. The Hans became mandatory. So did new headrests, safer seats, better wall barriers, and eventually, the car of tomorrow. Tony Roper never got that chance. But the rules that came after, they bear his fingerprints too. He wasn't the face of change, but he was part of the price that was paid to make it happen. Tony Roper didn't die chasing fame. He died chasing a dream, one forged in short tracks, fueled by grit, and ended by a crash that never should have been fatal. He raced with heart. He deserved more than a footnote.